The corner office on the 8th floor of Ashford Distribution looked out over a pewter Burlington sky. Vivian Ashford stood behind her walnut desk, palms flat on the wood. "Mr. Cole," she said, "the company cannot tolerate repeated tardiness. Your contract ends today. Effective immediately." Nathan Cole stood 3 steps away, dark blue flannel, sleeves rolled, a back that had learned to stay straight. He didn't defend himself. He looked at her for exactly 3 seconds. No anger, only something quieter, the way a man marks a thing so he won't forget it. Then he nodded once, turned, and walked out. Vivian stood very still, her fingers tightening against the desk for reasons she couldn't name. To understand his silence, rewind 7 hours. At 5:50 that morning, in a 2-bedroom apartment in South Burlington, Nathan buttered toast in a pressed flannel shirt. Lily, 8, came out holding an old stuffed bear. Daddy Madison says, "Her house has a mom and a dad. Ours only has you." Nathan knelt and tied a red ribbon in her hair. "I'm going to stay long enough today that every kid in your class sees your dad exists." She hugged him. At 7:15, Burlington Elementary's gym buzzed with donuts and 30 fathers. Nathan sat with Lily, who walked him table to table, introducing him to her friends. He'd planned to leave at 7:40. He stayed 20 extra minutes because she wouldn't let go of his hand. 7 miles north, Vivian was chairing the executive meeting. 36 charcoal blazer, 18 months into running the company she'd inherited from her late father. Chief Operating Officer Gordon Pierce, 52, who'd wanted her job for 20 years, slid a spreadsheet across the table. "One of our operations supervisors has logged 14 late arrivals in 3 months. Nathan Cole. If we can't enforce discipline on the floor, how do we convince the board on restructuring?" He didn't look at Vivian. Everyone else did. The signature at the bottom was his own. "I'll handle it today," she said. At 9:42, Nathan pulled into the lot. Walter Grady, the senior forklift operator, 67, nodded once. Nathan nodded back. Neither spoke. At his desk, a message read, "Miss Ashford would like to see you." He pocketed a photo of Lily and shut down his computer. At 10 o'clock, he took his dismissal without flinching. 3 seconds, a nod, the door clicking shut. Alone, Vivian reached for her water glass and noticed her hand shaking. "This is discipline," she told the empty office. "This is what the board needs to see." She never drank the water. At 10:08, Nathan packed a small box, Lily's photo, a leather notebook, a flashlight. The security officer walking him out was Marcus Webb, 23, whose pregnant wife waited at home, whose truck Nathan had once helped fix. "Sir, I'm sorry. It's procedure. You're doing your job, Marcus. Don't carry it home." In the lobby, Walter Grady stood near reception, though he hadn't been there minutes before. His eyes held Nathan's for 3 steps. Then Nathan was gone. By 11:30, Nathan sat in his truck and wrote 3 numbers on a napkin. 11,000 in savings. 3 months' rent, Lily's art class through June. He drove to Lake Champlain and sat by the water 2 hours. Without crying, he'd cried everything out 3 years earlier, the night his wife Julia died. When he'd called his mother-in-law to keep Lily and said he had paperwork at an office that no longer existed for him, at 1:15, Gordon Pierce clapped once in Vivian's office. "Well done. The board will see you have backbone." That evening, she dined with board members in Shelburne as rain began. Driving home alone on Route 7, her engine died. Roadside assistance, 90 minutes, her phone, 14%. She stood in the downpour and watched 23 vehicles pass. For the first time in years, Vivian Ashford felt invisible. At 8:11, a Ford pickup stopped nearby. Nathan stepped out in his flannel shirt. Neither moved for 3 seconds, the same 3 seconds from that morning, except now she couldn't speak. He checked the engine. "Fuel pump. Can't fix it here. I'll take you back to the city." He handed her his Carhartt jacket. She resisted. "You're soaked through, ma'am." She wore it, still warm, and climbed into the back seat, where the front seat held a sleeping child, cheeks flushed with fever, a drawing on her lap, a man, a woman with long hair, a girl with sunflowers. "This is Lily," Nathan said. "Picked her up from her grandmother's. She's running warm." Vivian watched the sleeping girl and thought, "This child should be home tonight, if this morning I hadn't fired her father." She turned to the window. He drove 18 minutes, 5 miles under the limit. No radio, only rain and wipers. Vivian held the jacket's collar to her face. Motor oil, honest work, nothing like anything in her own closets. She sat with one question growing in her chest. Who is this man? At 8:38, outside her building, she reached to return the jacket. Keep it. Give it back next week, he said, not realizing what he'd assumed, that there'd be a next week. She said the only sentence she managed all ride. Thank you, Nathan. He nodded and drove off. Vivian stood on her steps, 20 seconds, then sat down in her $1,000 blazer and cried for the first time in 18 months. She didn't sleep. By 6 o'clock, she was already headed to the 8th floor for the quarterly board meeting. The first to arrive was General Thomas Ridgway, 74, on the board since 1999. He paused at the staff directory, which displayed Contract Terminated, Nathan Cole, Operations. He stood there 10 seconds, then told the receptionist, Tell Miss Ashford I'd like to see her before the meeting. In private, 6 miles south, Nathan sat with cold coffee while Lily drew at the window desk. He still hadn't told her about the job. He hadn't found the words. 20 minutes later, General Ridgway sat across from Vivian. The man on your termination screen is Lieutenant Colonel Nathan Cole, United States Army Logistics Corps. I signed 2 commendations on his record. Under his command at Bagram, not one supply convoy was lost. He volunteered for a deployment nobody asked him to take because his wife was dying, and he wanted to finish his service before her time ran out. I'm sure you had reasons. I'd like to understand them. Vivian slid over the spreadsheet, Pierce's signature at the bottom. Ridgway studied it and set it down. I've served 41 years. I know the difference between a man late because he's careless and a man late because he was somewhere doing the right thing. Verify these numbers yourself, not through your chief operating officer. Your father hired me for the same reason he hired Cole. He could read a man's posture. I'd encourage you to trust what you saw last night. He left. Vivian buzzed her assistant. Get Eleanor Finch from HR. I need the raw attendance records for Nathan Cole, not summaries. Now. Eleanor Finch, 58, arrived with an unmarked USB drive. I've been holding on to this, she said. The data didn't lie. Over 3 months, Nathan had averaged an arrival of 7:55 a.m. Never once past 8:10, except the day she fired him, 9:42. 14 late arrivals, Pierce's report claimed. The raw data showed exactly 1. The access log showed Pierce had logged into the database 14 times, each within 12 hours of his summary reports. He'd been editing the file directly. Vivian looked down at the warehouse floor, unable to tell if the distant figure was Walter Grady. South of the city, Nathan warmed soup for Lily, who'd drawn only 2 figures, instead of her usual 3, Daddy and herself, no longer her mother, without telling him why. He didn't ask. He still hadn't figured out how to tell her about the job. Twice he almost called his cousin about work at a boatyard, and twice set the phone down when Lily entered the room. In her office, Vivian opened a drawer holding an unsent termination envelope. Final paycheck, dismissal letter, signed the day before. She left it unsealed. Eleanor, how long have you known that Pierce was editing the records? I knew they'd been altered, not by whom. Your father once told me the difference between a good company and a bad one is whether the truth stays recoverable, so I made sure it would. I owe him an apology. You owe several people several things. Him first. The next morning at 6:50, Walter Grady knocked on Vivian's door, holding a worn leather notebook. Each page logged dates and times in careful handwriting. Nathan's arrivals, months without a gap. I keep a notebook on every man at my dock, habit from the service. The colonel taught me 18 years ago that a leader who shows up early makes the whole crew show up on time. How long have you known who he is? Since his first week. I served under him in 2007. He pulled me out of a wrecked Humvee outside Mosul. He asked me to keep it quiet, didn't want special treatment. Walter tapped 3 entries. These 3 days, he covered my night shifts because my knee gave out, then stayed for the morning audit too. Pierce's summary logged those as late arrivals. He wasn't late, he was 12 hours early. At the door, he added, the colonel never told me his wife had passed. I only knew because Lily wore a butterfly pin at the Christmas party, the same one her mother wore in his office photos. He saw me notice, just nodded. Only personal thing we ever discussed. By noon, IT confirmed 96 days of tampered records, and counsel found Pierce's undisclosed 8% stake in a logistics firm bidding on the very restructuring contract he'd pushed. Vivian called Nathan. I'd like to come by this afternoon. There are things I need to say in person. A 3-second pause. Yes, ma'am. Lily's home by 3:30. She smiled for the first time in 18 months. At 3:45, Vivian arrived at Nathan's apartment carrying a manila envelope reinstatement contract. Handwritten apology, the report on Pierce. Lily opened the door. "You're the lady from the back of Daddy's truck," and pulled her in before Vivian could speak. On the refrigerator hung 30 drawings, 29 showing 3 figures, the newest showing to beneath a maple tree. Nathan appeared unsurprised. "Miss Ashford, Vivian." She sat, slid the envelope over. He didn't touch it. The records were falsified. Pierce was editing them himself and steering the contract to a firm he owns. "I have a board meeting Monday. I came because you deserve this apology in your home without an audience." He studied her, then went to make tea. Lily patted the floor beside her, and Vivian, who hadn't sat on a floor in 15 years, slipped off her shoes and joined her. Lily explained her drawings. Daddy, Mommy, who lives in heaven now, and herself. She'd stopped drawing her mother the past month. "Why? Mommy's still real. She's just not here. I didn't want Daddy to be sad." Vivian's eyes welled. Nathan returned with tea, watched them a moment, then sat on the floor beside his daughter. They stayed there until the tea went cold. When Lily fell asleep, Nathan carried her to bed. Returning, he found Vivian still on the floor. "You didn't have to apologize in person. I'd have read the letter." "I know," she said. He nodded and said nothing more. Monday, the boardroom filled by 7 o'clock, Pierce sat at Vivian's right. Smiling, she didn't return it. Before restructuring, she said, "I have a personnel and disclosure matter." Slides followed. Raw attendance data. The access log showing 96 edits from Pierce's account, his badge number, a scanned page from Walter's notebook, and his undisclosed stake in the bidding firm. "Fabricated," Pierce said. "A warehouse worker's testimony has no legal standing." The door opened. Nathan walked in, wearing his Carhartt jacket, followed by Walter Grady in pressed coveralls, followed by General Ridgway, who'd stepped out minutes earlier under pretense of a call. "Sergeant First Class Walter Grady served 22 years, Ridgway said. "His testimony regarding Lieutenant Colonel Nathan Cole, under whom he served in combat, is to me a legal document. I'll sign an affidavit today." The vote took 4 minutes, 8-1. Termination for cause. Pierce set his badge on the table and walked out. Eleanor Finch entered with Nathan's complete personnel file, every commendation she'd quietly protected for the day someone would finally ask. Across the emptying room, Nathan and Vivian exchanged a single nod. No one else noticed. Neither needed more. 6 weeks passed, snow reached Burlington. Nathan was reinstated as director of operations, still driving the same truck, still eating lunch with the forklift crew. Walter's notebook now sat in a glass case outside Vivian's office. In mid-November, Lily held her first art show at the community center. Having mailed Vivian an invitation herself, addressed in pencil, reading "Please don't tell my dad" at the bottom, Vivian arrived in the same blazer from the night of the rain, now cleaned. Nathan gave her the same small nod of recognition. Lily led her to a new drawing, 3 figures under a maple tree, a man, a girl, and a woman with brown hair, standing slightly apart, hand reaching out. No one asked who she was. Afterward, the 3 walked the boardwalk, exchanging few words. Watching geese, Lily ran back, certain she'd found something rare. Nathan knelt to admire what wasn't there, and Vivian watched him do it with quiet patience. A mallard flew low. "Julia liked the geese in the fall," he said, and fell silent. At the parking lot, Vivian tried to return the washed jacket. "Keep it, Vivian. It'll only get colder." She didn't argue. He gave her the same small nod he'd given her in the office, on Route 7 in the boardroom, and walked away. She watched until the truck was gone, the lake steel gray, the sun sinking behind the ridges. By March, Nathan had moved into a small house with a fenced yard. Vivian arrived one Sunday with a potted sugar maple sapling. At Lily's request, a tree that turns red in fall. They planted it together against the south fence, while Nathan watched from the kitchen window. 6 months in, nothing between them had a name, no date, no declaration, just Sundays, sometimes dinner, sometimes homework help. Once Nathan, fixing her cabinet door, while she made spaghetti in his kitchen, and Lily set 3 plates unasked, General Ridgway, newly retired, had told Vivian at his dinner, "Your father would be proud of your choices." That afternoon, having patted down the soil, Lily asked plainly, "Are you staying for dinner?" Vivian looked to the window. Nathan nodded. She nodded back. That evening, the three sat around the small table. Nathan cut bread. Lily told a story about a classmate's turtle. Vivian passed the butter. A candle burned, lit by Lily, because the table looked bare. Midway through, Lily asked if Vivian knew how to braid hair. Vivian admitted she hadn't in 20 years, and Lily turned and waited. Nathan watched without smiling, without looking away. Vivian braided it, unevenly, and Lily declared it good in the dark window's reflection. No one said love. No one said family. Nathan refilled a water glass. Vivian reached for the salt. Lily laughed at the candlelight. Outside, the small sugar maple stood in soft dirt, waiting for April. Neither of them had been watching it. That was the only reason they could trust that it was.